Noelle brings a wealth of knowledge from her years at the forefront of crypto research, including her roles as head of research for CoinDesk and head of market insights for Genesis Global Trading. Beyond tracking price movements, Noelle focuses on how crypto developments really shape broader market dynamics and future global economies. And through her latest venture, Crypto is Macro Now, she delivers insightful analyses on adoption trends, regulatory changes, and the symbiotic relationship between crypto assets and the macroeconomy. And today we are set to unpack these complex interactions and understand why in Noelle's words, it matters now more than ever. She also has some really exciting collaborative efforts on the horizon, and I look forward to engaging with that. So whether you're an investor, a builder, a regulator, or even a skeptic, I'm glad that you're tuning in today as we explore the pivotal role of crypto in today's financial world. We will talk about all of that and more in a moment, but first, Noelle, welcome.
Tanya, thank you so much. It is so good to be here with you.
Yay. Well, it's been a long time coming. I'm wicked excited in the work that you do because I think it's so important. And as we've talked previously, your voice is so critically important because of the inextricable link between the emerging crypto asset industry and existing macroeconomic principles and influences. And so first, to start off, could you share what sparked your interest at the intersection of cryptocurrency and macroeconomics?
From the very beginning, to be honest, Tanya, I'll wind back the clock and go back many, many years. I come from traditional finance originally. I'm a maths nerd, and so I went straight into markets after finishing university. And
Mm,
then I set up an e-commerce business. I live in Spain, and back in the day, and this is a long time ago, there wasn't that much going on the internet, and I was influenced by some of the American models I'd seen. And so anyway, I dove into that, and had I known how hard it would be, I probably would have had second thoughts. But
mm,
there were five of us when we launched. Anyway, that's a whole different story. I sold that business in 2013, and then I was going to take a year off to recover my
mm,
brain because burnout, trying to sell the business and everything. Started
right.
reading about what had been happening in the world in my absence when I wasn't paying attention. I'm interested in finance, I'm interested in technology, and I kept hearing about this thing called Bitcoin. And I
Mm,
don't like not understanding something. So I went on to Khan Academy. Do you remember Khan Academy? I
yes.
watched the YouTube version of how Bitcoin works, and I
Yes.
got goosebumps, Tanya. And the reason I got goosebumps was because I realized I was looking at permissionless payments, and I grew up in Zambia, in the middle of
Mm,
Africa. And just the realization of what permissionless payments could do in that part of the world that doesn't have the same kind of sophisticated financial system that you and I have the privilege of enjoying. So
right.
obviously, permissionless payments hasn't ended up being the main use case for Bitcoin, but to understand how the technology works, it's very natural that your mind does go to that because that is, after all, sort of what it was created for. It's an
Mm,
interesting reminder that we as humans are universally terrible at knowing, at seeing what new technologies will be used for. We can say this about crypto, we can say this about the internet, we can say this
true.
about steel, about the phonograph, going all the way back. But it was what drew me into this, was the potential impact of the crypto technology, of Bitcoin's technology more specifically, on a macro economy in the area where I grew up. And obviously it has ended up being so much bigger than I
Mm,
imagined. And I'll finish with saying that I dove into this head first. I just knew that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my next career. The more I researched it, the more I realized the problems, the barriers in the way to it being used for permissionless payments in the part of the world
mm,
that I was particularly interested in. And that got me even more interested because it was only when you look at the barriers you understand the potential disruption ahead. You know how you can judge the quality of a person by the quality of their enemies? You can judge the quality
mm.
of an idea by the depth of the barriers in the way.
I love so much how you phrase that because how we can get engaged in a conversation of use cases, and we call them use cases until they're actual uses, right? And so oftentimes I remember I entered the space in 2017. It was at a time of folks saying, blockchain, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin obviously was at the time going through a bear cycle. There was some bad news headlines. It kind of reminds me now of the crypto contagion years, more recently. And as an intellectual property lawyer by training, and someone who's just naturally cautious, I have a high aversion to risk, which is difficult for people to understand given the work that I do and the love that I have for the ecosystem. But I actually think that is a feature, not a bug, of my interaction and kind of my rabbit hole experience of focusing on taking a deep dive at the intersection of my existing expertise and the technology to understand the potential and even actual at that time disruptive impacts and the transformative impacts. And so I
I would
love.
imagine also your training as a lawyer would give you deep insight into how to protect against risks, not run away from them,
That's
but
correct.
how to protect against the adverse impacts.
Absolutely, because then with that training focused on issue spotting,
Mm.
right? Problem solving. And I never was the type of lawyer that was just a 30-page legal analysis that at the end says no. No could be in a range of possibilities, but how do we support technology and innovation and builders? But that also brought me back to your point of not just understanding the technology, but the original use case.
Hmm.
Can unpack the white paper, understand peer-to-peer cash, and I understand all of that. And the progeny may serve well, or stable coins may have a role there, obviously, but that doesn't undermine the impact on a global scale, which is what you get to the heart of. I talk more
Absolutely.
about that.
And there's no progress without risk.
Hmm.
But then we've also seen, especially over the past couple of years, just how damage unprotected risk can bring
Right.
to an ecosystem, to individuals even, which is most painful. And so I imagine in what you see,
Absolutely.
you must see a lot of that. It's not a question of running away from the risk. It's a question of how do you solve for it? How do you protect? And one of my
Hmm.
favorite sayings, Sonia, is success is not having problems to solve. It's not having the same problems as last year.
We talked about me being a former tennis professional. My coach would love that. It's like if you're going to miss a
Yes.
serve,
Yes.
don't miss the same one. If you're going to hit it in the
Exactly.
net, and
Make it for something different.
that's right. Let's hit it
Oh,
long. If you're going to make a mistake,
exactly. And don't
love
make
it.
the same mistakes, make different ones.
Exactly. Talk about, you've emphasized a lot in your work that crypto is not just a technology, but also a significant player on the global stage. We're just kind of starting to unpack that. Can you discuss a pivotal moment or development that highlighted that shift for you? It sounds like from your crypto rabbit hole moment, there was something initially, but over the course of your interaction in the space, any particular moment or moments in the development that highlighted this seismic shift?
Absolutely, and you might well regret asking me that because this is where I get very excited. What the moment for me? Well, first of all, as I mentioned in the intro, I used to work in traditional finance, and
Mm,
I thought I understood money, but it turns out I just moved it around. I was conflating money with numbers, and
mm,
that's what pretty much everyone in TradFi does today. They conflate money with numbers. The moment for me, Tanya, was when I realized that I didn't understand money. And it took Bitcoin for me to realize that. It took Bitcoin to put a new question on the table. And this is where I get excited. One of the biggest impacts that the Bitcoin white paper introduced into our way of thinking about not just finance, but also human rights, also independence, also collaboration, was the questions. We have a new set of questions now.
mm,
Throughout our history, new technologies have given us new tools to ask better questions, always. And this is no exception. I mean, the questions that are being asked now have never been asked before, and they do, unlike other questions, they do have the potential to change how we see the structures of society. That is
mhm.
exhilarating, but it's also terrifying, let's face it. And this is one of the reasons that probably there's so much pushback, and we can understand why there is so much pushback as well. The question for me was understanding that I did not understand what money was, and realizing that everyone working in traditional finance doesn't understand it either.
Right.
And then the next step is imagining what money could be.
Hmm.
Told what money is. We're given the definition of money. I don't know how many people you've had tell you, no, Bitcoin is not money for this, and this reasons. It doesn't check all the boxes. And no one's
Right.
thinking to ask, but who set those boxes in the first place? Why can't it? Why do we have to stick to that definition? Why can't Bitcoin be money if you and I are willing to exchange goods for Bitcoin? Why can't ETH be money if we're buying NFTs with it? Why can't stablecoins be money when effectively they
Hmm.
represent the cash that we are so familiar with? These kind of questions are indeed so interesting. And then you start pulling at even more threads and you start
Right.
asking, what even is a bearer asset? What is property? What are digital rights? Is privacy a natural right? These kind of
Hmm.
things are not going to be put back in the box ever. And they are also edging towards the mass or the momentum where they can start to cause fractures in the way society is run. We're already starting to see that.
Absolutely. And we can even have, I had the same experience with, for all of my privilege of education and travel and what I thought I knew, my education for money and economics began in 2017. When, in order to fully understand and appreciate the impact and the options and the opportunities and the risks, as we've talked about, which is why I think there was a gap in understanding between someone who was curious and wanted to understand and the way the narrative about Bitcoin rolled out from the tech and finance spaces, right? Kind of tech and finance had a baby. Now we have crypto. And there was an even broader gap in the way that people could understand because we're using words kind of like an analog version and by analogy that wasn't a neat fit because we were talking around the fundamental question of what it means on a peer-to-peer basis to exchange value and how that
Absolutely.
might be represented, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
And how many people need to be involved? I mean, I would push it.
mm,
I love your phrasing of, tech and finance had a baby. And I'd throw in there that philosophy got involved somehow also. Tech finance and philosophy had a baby
mm,
because when you go back to the white paper that we were
mm,
just mentioning, it wanted to create a cash equivalent online that was peer to peer, where you didn't have the electronic middlemen. That's philosophy. That is are we why do we not want the electronic middleman? And that's when you start thinking about, do I really want the authorities to control my every single financial transaction? And that's when you
mhm.
realize that most people don't realize that that's what's going on. Once that idea is planted, though, it doesn't really go away. And
It doesn't.
that's the fundamental shift that we're starting to see the effects of, but we don't really know where this is going to go.
Talk to me about the evolution of the newsletter and how you are using that as a medium to educate, to inform, and really to inspire.
That's very kind of you to say that. Thank you. Also, to be honest, I learn by writing. I'm an analyst.
Mm,
I've always said that, you can train to be an analyst, but I do believe many of us were born to be analysts. And I think I was born to be an analyst because I just love going deep into things and I learn by explaining. I learn through
mm.
writing. So if I have a question, I'll write about it because I'm sure other people might have the question. And even if not, I have fun doing so. The newsletter was born by just trying to understand not so much how macro markets are impacting crypto. That's a lot of what I did when I was at Genesis Trading and also at
Mhm.
CoinDesk. What is driving crypto markets? Well, yes, it does have to do with the dollar. Yes, it does have to do with liquidity, etc. For sure. Used to that. What I was interested in, I mean, that's a narrative which is fun to
Oh,
continue exploring, especially given the changes we've seen recently. But what
mm,
I'm especially interested in is how crypto technology, blockchain technology, distributed ledgers are going to change the macro economy. And again,
mhm.
it started out when you and I got into this, Tanya, it was so niche. It was
Right.
irrelevant, really. You can't say it's irrelevant anymore.
No.
What I'm focusing on is not just the crypto asset, not just cryptocurrencies, although obviously that was my origin in this exploration, and that's
Mhm.
where my not libertarian heart, but it is definitely where my philosophical
Mhm.
leanings lie. But in terms of the macro impact, it is CBDCs, it is tokenization, it is the ability of new types of markets to spring
Mm,
up anywhere relatively quickly and bring liquidity to corners of markets that haven't seen much of that, to open access to markets as well. I'm a
mhm.
markets nerd, as you might have gathered, and markets, should be a tool for freedom. and for opportunity, and arguably they're not anymore. They
Right.
are gated, and they are exaggerators of the inequality that we're seeing. However, this is
Mhm.
what I've been looking into a lot recently, and it's just getting more and more interesting.
When you frame your point of view in that direction, and we still see, because we're speaking at a global level, the regulatory frameworks that continue to evolve around, under, over, beside, through
In between.
crypto, in between. And when you when you disrupt an industry that is already heavily regulated, it's kind of utopian dream to say that it operates outside, but in some sense, operates outside and yet uh, within and through. We
Mhm.
have these geo-fenced regulatory frameworks trying to, and we've done this before with the earlier iterations of the internet. This is the next iteration where instead of just moving information, now we're moving money on a peer-to-peer basis. How do you assess the current landscape from a regulatory perspective? What are the potential impacts of regulations on global crypto markets? It's a huge question, but I love your perspective and insight, kind of get at the heart of the kind of the ideal calibration between protection of consumers and investors, but also protecting the innovation that is really changing the world.
That's an excellent question, and you're right. It is something that you and I could talk for hours about because
Hmm.
where even to start? I will say that from the beginning, obviously the regulators, I can't say I approve of how many of them have approached the industry, as you can probably
Fair.
gather, but let's spare a thought for what they have to grapple with. One,
Agree.
this is radically different from what they've had to deal with so far. Two, if they embrace it, they may well be out of a job fairly soon.
Fair.
And three, this kind of disruption is just plain old terrifying, especially if you are responsible for keeping some semblance of order. So, I understand their reactions on many of the front. What I have been particularly intrigued by, I won't say frustrated because
Mm,
this was inevitable, but I'll say intrigued by, is the United States approach to global finance, as in they control pretty much everything that's going on. They decide which transactions are allowed, even if they don't
mm,
even touch US borders. They decide what the rules are going to be around illicit financing without actually defining what illicit means. Because again,
mm,
what is illicit for some is not necessarily illicit for others, etc., etc. And this kind of heavy approach, heavy handed approach, is one of the big drivers of exploration of alternative technologies, such as crypto technologies, around the world, looking
mm.
for ways to lessen the authoritarian approach of the United States. I'm not saying it's an authoritarian government, I'm saying
Fair.
they have an authoritarian approach to global
Hmm.
finance. And there is now a technology that can help interested parties get around that. It's certainly not
Hmm.
easy, and it's certainly not going to be a nice, peaceful transition, but
Right.
it exists now. And again, this is both exhilarating but also terrifying because it's not, deep change is rarely peaceful.
Uh, Absolutely. And you're being generous by saying rarely, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But you know what, Tanya? I don't know if you remember back in the early, I mean, we've often said this, where the day when Bitcoin really takes off and goes
Mm,
mainstream is going to be a pretty bleak day for most. In other words, for
that's right.
when Bitcoin is attracting a lot of mainstream attention, it's because things are really messed up elsewhere.
Oh, that's well said. I'm gonna we could have a whole show just around that. I am restraining myself because there are 50 million things I want to staying on. I got to get you lovingly back to your life. So, but it's so well said because if you have something that's basically like, Bitcoin fixes this, that necessarily means that something is broken.
Absolutely. And we can also then there's so much to pull on there. Bitcoin
Mhm.
doesn't really necessarily fix everything
Right.
without creating a whole lot of other problems as well. There is no such thing as a nice easy solution here. But for the very first time, there is a new tool in the box. And that
Hmm.
kind of choice. I mean, I'm a free markets person, like choice. That kind of choice is new. And what's more, Tanya, it is a choice that is available to anyone, anywhere. You and I
Hmm.
grew up with choice, but we live in fairly privileged societies. Most
Right.
people don't have that luxury, except with crypto assets and crypto markets. They do have choice. And yes, there are regulators around the world, both national as well as the supranational ones. They do want to control that choice because that is how they see their roles as keeping the peace. But
Hmm.
we also, any student of history, and I'm not an expert in history myself, but I do know how freedom eventually will find a way. And
Mm.
when there is a tool in the box that,
You said peace, but also power, right?
yes,
There's
totally.
the balance of keeping the peace, but also of enabling power structures to remain. And so the fractures and the fissures that you mentioned earlier, we're starting to see that and seeing even in the United States, where these regional bank failures, they're not exactly on the front pages, but we just had another one happen as well. We had another regional bank takeover. Republic Bank, last year there were three. And it's kind of like nothing to see here. Keep consuming. We have more money
Keep
coming into the
consuming.
system,
Keep
right?
consuming
Keep
because we
consuming.
need the economy to grow. We have to have the economy to grow as people are happier when the economy is growing. But I mean, as an example, I was just reading yesterday about the United States is now thinking of applying sanctions to Chinese banks for
Mm.
dealing with Russian businesses. I mean,
Right,
these are banks in China dealing with
right.
Russia. And so, of course, this is going to impact some of the exports in the meantime, but they're going to be looking for alternatives. They're going to be looking for workarounds because
Mm.
why is the United States telling Chinese banks who they can do business with? I mean, we can
Right.
obviously understand that you don't want to fund, depending on which side you're on
Sure.
this. We can understand it, but you can also to put yourself in the shoes of those running the Chinese banks,
Hmm.
saying, who is the United States to tell us what we can and cannot do? And this is driving the wedge. This is incentivizing a deeper exploration of
Mm.
alternatives at a time there is a new technology that can help to facilitate this. Again, there's no
Yeah.
fix it, but there are solutions.
What, this is on this point, crypto obviously has its share of skeptics, um, as well as proponents. But from your perspective, what are the most common misconceptions? When I sat down to write Digital Money Demystified, I found myself answering the same questions over and over again. I'm sure you address them as well. Crypto is a scam. It's a fad. It's only for criminals. It's only for a certain demographic. All of it is horrible for the environment. It's too volatile. There's so many misconceptions, or maybe sometimes there's a kernel of truth, but we need to right size the conversation. What are the common misconceptions about crypto, and how do you address them in your work?
You mentioned a lot of them, and they're all ones that I actually am very fond of because they're so much fun to talk about. They're all based on biases, which in turn tend to be based on personal experience, but also ideology. And
Mm.
the one that drives, I will say that I'll single out of all of those, I'll single out the one that irritates me the most these days, and I hear it a lot, and that is crypto has no utility.
Mm.
And let's even narrow it down. Let's not even go into the DeFi utility and stablecoin
Mm.
utility. Obviously, they have utility, but let's go to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no utility. And this is always, without exception, said to me by people who live in very privileged financial systems. They don't need Bitcoin. Yes, you don't need Bitcoin, but if you look a little bit beyond your nice little white turret walls,
Right.
you'll see that a lot of the world does not enjoy the same financial systems that you and I do. And for many, Bitcoin is a terrible payments mechanism, but it's better than what they have.
Right.
And for many, it is often the only option that they have. I was looking into the Stripe announcement that they're going to be
Yep.
accepting stable coins. I think that is actually quite mind bending. But again, but if you don't have a bank account, how are you going to buy your stable coins? Well, you go to the marketplace with your cash and someone downloads
Mm.
it onto your even just a not smartphone. That kind of utility is what most people that I talk to in the comfortable Western societies don't understand. And it's frustrating to me, Tonya, because it's a very narrow view of the world. It's a very
Right.
privileged view of the world. And in my opinion, it's a very prejudiced view of the world. The world is a big
Mhm.
place, and it's about helping everyone, not just number go up, not just make money on this. It's more than that. That's another thing that irritates, another idea that
Mm,
irritates me a lot about crypto markets, that it is just for speculation. It's for
right.
speculation, yes, in some areas, in some cases, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But it's not that for everyone, everywhere, all the time.
Mm. That leads me to one of the final questions I wanted to explore with you, and that's what I perceive as the a shift also from hyper competitive models from an macroeconomic and even just a social interaction point of view to the age of partnerships and collaborations. And I know that you're working on something, so kind of thread the needle there between what we've been talking about and some of the things you're working on in terms of a collaborative effort to bring more awareness to the fore and more opportunity.
Thank you so much for that question. Well, as you probably gathered, I get excited about markets. And one of the
Yeah.
reasons I'm in this industry is because I'm fascinated about how markets are evolving. And, I have two hats. One is the Crypto's Macro Now newsletter that we've discussed. The other hat is I'm setting up an advisory with two other women who also have years of experience in the crypto space with complementary skill sets. And we aim to support businesses expanding the universe of crypto markets and the products they offer by helping with go to market, liquidity, and messaging strategies. It's about pushing the envelope on not just how markets work, although definitely a big part of that, but the very concept of markets. We're seeing, I would argue, one of the biggest step changes in what we understand markets to even be that we've seen, I guess, in generations. And to be helping businesses experimenting, building, and actually helping making things work, that's really
Mm.
very exciting.
That makes me think of something that I just started because, as an early adopter, even though I don't come from a technology background, tinkering with whatever the new technology is, I'm wildly fascinated by the notion of decentralized artificial intelligence. I'm wildly fascinated by, chatbots and AI assistants. I'm in currently tinkering with my own AI learning assistant and training a model with my research, my writing, my speaking, so
That
that
is
people can
such a
have
good idea.
like a little Professor Evans in their pocket. And then marry it also with, the latest technology, the ability to search the web, to bring historical and existing data with whatever trend is hitting the news. It's that kind of gap between knowledge that I really want to fill. And I can't be all the places. And so few people are having this conversation now, particularly in education. So I need to talk with you and your partners about that as well. But with the opportunities that you are presenting for people to explore and have the space and maybe the financial support, but even more importantly, in my humble estimation, your years of combined experience. That is priceless. Can you use some final words about encouraging people to keep leaning in and moving forward, so that we're not quote unquote left behind. It's almost left behind is an understatement at this point with the rapidity of change. So a collaborative effort like yours keeps people on the leading edge.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say that. Thank you. And I would totally agree. And this brings us back to one of the big advantages of our ecosystem, Tony, of the crypto industry. I've never worked with such a collaborative group of people. And that is
Mm,
because we are all trying to do something new. No one knows everything. We're all relative newcomers here. No matter how long we've been in this industry, we're
right.
all relative newcomers. We all remember what it was like to not understand. We all remember what it was like to first realize that money is not what we thought it was, that markets can be different. And the diversity of people that from different backgrounds, young, old, from all over the world, who just care about change, about understanding the changes that we're seeing, not just in markets, but also in every other aspect of society today. And we're all quite excited about having a front row seat to these changes and hopefully making a tiny little bit of difference to what the world will look like in years to come. It is a collaborative industry, the
Mm,
most collaborative I've seen so far. It is a very diverse industry, the most diverse I've experienced so far. And the
absolutely.
fact that we're all working in this together is really exciting. Yes, of course, it's competitive because these businesses somehow have to justify their existence. But beyond that, we all care about each other succeeding. And that's why it is a privilege, again, to be working with my partners in this advisory venture to not only to continue to learn from each other, because we've known each other for years, but to continue to learn from each other, but also learn from our clients and help our clients to grow while sharing what we have learned along the way.
That's really exciting. I want you to let folks know how they can learn more about you and your work, and certainly the newsletter that everyone must subscribe to. And I will share all of those links in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Really appreciate it. You can, it's Crypto is Macro now on Substack, and you can follow me, Noelle in Madrid, on Twitter, where I occasionally tweet photos of the beautiful city I live in.
And I will see you over there. I did a river cruise from Porto in Portugal to Spain and back. I didn't spend nearly enough time in Spain, though. I was eating and drinking my way through the area. But I have to do a part 2. And when I do that,
Definitely.
we will definitely be IRL and continue this nation building that we're doing.
That would be so much fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's been lovely talking to you.